everyone's arguing about ShedeurSanders, and that might be the biggest mistake they're making right now. Because while the media debates, ranks, and questions everything from his decision-making to his ceiling, Shedeur isn't saying a word. No interviews firing back. No social media rants. No desperate attempts to prove people wrong. Instead, he disappeared into a place most people wouldn't even take seriously at first glance: his basement. And what's happening down there? That's where things start to get uncomfortable for everyone watching from the outside. This isn't your typical off-season story. No staged workouts for cameras. No overproduced hype videos meant to trend for a day and disappear. What's being built is quieter, more controlled, and honestly, a little unsettling if you're someone still doubting him. Because that basement, it's no longer just a room in his house. It's turning into a private training ground, customized, isolated, and built for one purpose only: getting better when nobody's watching. And here's the part people aren't ready to admit yet. Players who move like this, they don't stay potential for long. While analysts throw out names, compare prospects, and push new narratives every week, Shedeur is doing something much harder to measure. He's removing distractions completely. No noise, no debate, just repetition, discipline, and control over every detail of his game. The kind of work that doesn't go viral easily, but when it finally shows up on the field, it hits all at once. But that raises a bigger question nobody seems to be asking. Why now? Why is he locking in at this level this early, with this much intensity, before most players have even fully shifted into off-season mode? Because this isn't just about improving. It feels like preparation for something bigger, something people on the outside aren't fully seeing yet. And the timing couldn't be more interesting. At the exact moment when conversations around him are getting louder, when critics are getting more confident, and when debates about his future are starting to pick up, he's going in the opposite direction. Quieter, sharper, more focused than ever, almost like he already knows something the rest of the football world hasn't caught on to yet. That's what makes this different. This isn't hype, it's not just training, and it's definitely not random. If you love real talk and fearless NFL breakdowns, hit subscribe and join Coach Speaks. Something is building here, and if you're only paying attention to headlines and opinions, you're probably missing it completely. So the real question is whether ShedeurSanders is working hard. It's what exactly he's preparing for, and why it feels like the entire narrative around him is about to flip when nobody expects it. It didn't look like much at first. Just a basement, 4 walls, low ceiling, nothing that screams future NFL dominance. But somewhere along the way, that space stopped being ordinary and quietly turned into the most important part of ShedeurSanders' off-season. Because this isn't just where he works out, it's where he's separating himself. The moment that turf went down, everything changed. Now it wasn't just a room, it was a controlled environment. A place where every step, every drop back, every throw could be repeated over and over without interruption. No distractions, no cameras unless he wants them there, just pure, focused reps. And that matters more than people realize. Most players train hard, sure, but they rely on scheduled sessions, team facilities, or public workouts. Shedeur flipped that completely. He built a system where the work never has to stop. Late nights, he's already there. Early mornings, no commute, no waiting, just straight into the grind. That kind of access creates something dangerous, consistency at a level most players can't match. But here, where it gets interesting. The clips people see online, that's just a fraction of it. A few throws, a quick footwork drill, maybe a glimpse of him smiling, locked in, confident. But what's not being shown is the repetition behind it, the missed throws that get corrected. The footwork adjustments happening in real time. The hours that stack up when nobody's watching. That's the real story of that basement. And it's why this setup is so powerful. Because when you remove the outside world, you remove the noise. No analysts breaking down every movement. No social media reacting instantly. No pressure to perform for anyone except yourself. That's where real development happens, quietly, consistently, and without interruption. And you can already see the shift. His movements look sharper, more controlled. There's a rhythm starting to form, like everything is being fine-tuned piece by piece. This isn't random training. It's intentional. Every rep has a purpose, and every session builds on the last. But what makes this even more serious is the mindset behind it. He's not treating this like a phase. This isn't off-season mode. This feels like preparation for something bigger, like he's already playing catch-up with a version of himself the rest of the world hasn't seen yet. And that's where people might be underestimating what's happening. Because when a player creates his own environment like this, he's not just improving physically, he's building control. Control over his time, his focus, and his development. And once that kind of routine locks in, it's hard to break. But the basement isn't the full story. It's just the foundation. Because while he's putting in all this work behind closed doors, something else is happening at the same time. Something much louder, much more public, and a lot more chaotic. And the gap between those two worlds, that's where things start to get really interesting. Out there, the conversation never stops. Turn on any debate show, scroll through any sports feed, and you'll see it. Opinions flying, rankings shifting, narratives being built and torn down overnight. And right in the middle of all that noise is ShedeurSanders, constantly discussed, constantly questioned, constantly evaluated like he's already on trial before even stepping into his next chapter. Some analysts point at his numbers. Others question his situation. A few even suggest there are better options or safer picks. It's the same cycle every year. New names get pushed, new comparisons are made, and suddenly the conversation becomes less about what a player is doing and more about what people think he might not be. But here's the disconnect. While all of that is happening publicly, Shedeur is doing the exact opposite privately. No responses, no interviews trying to correct the narrative, no subtle shots on social media, just silence and work. And that silence, it's louder than anything being said on TV. Because most players, when they hear doubt, react. They defend themselves, explain their mindset, or try to win the argument. Shedeur doesn't. He lets the conversation run without him, almost like he understands something most people don't. The moment you start arguing with noise, you become part of it. Instead, he stays in control of the only thing that actually matters, his preparation. That's why the basement matters so much. It's not just a training space, it's separation from the chaos. While headlines are being written about him, he's rewriting his own story in private, one rep at a time. And the gap between perception and reality, it keeps getting wider. But here, where it starts to shift. Because when someone refuses to engage with the noise, people get uncomfortable. The usual cycle breaks. Analysts can't pull reactions. Critics don't get responses. And slowly, the focus starts turning back to the one thing they can't control, his actual performance. And that's when doubt turns into curiosity. You start seeing questions change. Not is he good enough, but what if we've been looking at this wrong? Not who replaces him, but what happens if he actually takes that next step? That shift doesn't happen overnight. It builds quietly, just like his training. And the longer he stays locked in, the harder it becomes to ignore. Because at some point the work shows up. It always does. And when it does, all those opinions, all those debates, all that noise, it doesn't disappear, it flips. The same voices that questioned him start trying to explain how they missed it. The same narratives that doubted him get rewritten in real time. But by then, it's too late to catch up. And that's what makes this moment so important. Right now, it's still talk versus silence, doubt versus discipline, noise versus focus. But that balance isn't going to last. Because while everyone else is busy discussing what he might be, he's already working toward what he's about to become. There's a different kind of conversation starting to build now, quieter than the debates, but way more interesting. It's not about stats. It's not about rankings. It's about something deeper, whether a system is quietly being shaped around ShedeurSanders. And depending on who you ask, the answers start to sound very different. Some reports suggest that there's a growing belief behind the scenes that Shedeur isn't just another quarterback expected to fit in. Instead, The idea is to build around what he does best: his timing, his decision-making, his ability to stay composed under pressure. But to be clear, a lot of this is still speculation. Nothing official, nothing confirmed. Just patterns people are starting to notice and connect. Because when you look closely, it starts to make sense. Quarterbacks at the highest level don't just succeed because they're talented. They succeed because everything around them is aligned. The play calling, the protection, the tempo, it all works together to amplify what they naturally do well. And when that alignment is missing, even great players can look average. That's why this narrative matters. If a system is truly being built with Shedeur in mind, it changes everything. It means his strengths won't be adjusted or limited. They'll be highlighted. It means the game slows down, decisions become cleaner, and his natural instincts take over instead of being forced into something that doesn't fit. And suddenly, the conversation shifts from "can he succeed?" to "how far can he go?" But here, where it gets even more interesting. Because while people are speculating about systems and strategy on the outside, Shedeur is preparing like that system already exists. The footwork drills, the timing of his throws, the rhythm in his movements, it all looks intentional. Like he's not just training randomly, but building toward a specific style of play. Almost like he knows what's coming, even if the public does yet. And that's where curiosity starts turning into tension. Because if this alignment is real, or even partially real, it means the version of Shedeur people have seen so far might not be the final version at all. It might just be a preview, limited by circumstances that are slowly being adjusted behind the scenes. But again, it's important to stay grounded here. There's no official confirmation of a perfect system being built. No clear statement saying everything is designed specifically for him. What we're seeing are signals, patterns, and growing conversations that suggest something could be shifting. And sometimes, that's how the biggest changes start, not with announcements, but with quiet adjustments that only become obvious later. Still, one thing is clear. If the right system does come together, if the structure, protection, and play design all start working in sync with his strengths, then everything people thought they knew about ShedeurSanders might need to be reevaluated. Because that's when potential stops being a conversation and starts becoming a problem for everyone else. There's one detail that keeps getting overlooked in all the debates, and it might be the most important piece of the entire story. Protection. If you love real talk and fearless NFL breakdowns, hit subscribe and join Coach Speaks. For all the conversations about talent, arm strength, and decision-making, very few people are asking a simple question about ShedeurSanders. What has he actually had to work behind? Because when you go back and really watch, a pattern starts to show up. Pressure, constant pressure. From his earlier days to more recent stretches, he's rarely had the luxury most top quarterbacks depend on: a clean pocket. Instead, he's been forced to operate in chaos. Collapsing protection, defenders breaking through, plays falling apart before they even fully develop. Situations that would rattle most players, yet somehow he keeps finding ways to deliver. And that changes how you should evaluate everything. It's easy to judge a quarterback when the structure around him is solid. Clean pocket, clear reads, time to step into throws. That's when the position looks smooth, almost effortless. But when that structure breaks down, that's where you see the difference between someone who can function and someone who can adapt. That's the environment Shedeur has been dealing with. He's had to speed up his internal clock, make decisions faster than designed, and move under pressure on a consistent basis. Not occasionally, consistently. And while that can limit production on paper, it builds something else that doesn't always show up in stats: resilience, awareness, and composure. Still, there's a cost. Because no matter how talented a quarterback is, there's only so much you can do when the pocket collapses too quickly. Roots don't fully develop. Deep shots become risks instead of opportunities. And entire sections of the playbook get reduced simply because there isn't enough time to execute them properly. So what people have been watching, might not even be the full version of him. It might be a restricted version, one forced to survive instead of fully operate. And that's where the real concern and opportunity comes in. Because if that protection improves, even slightly, the entire dynamic shifts. Suddenly, those tight windows become clearer. Those rushed decisions turn into calculated ones. And those flashes of high-level play, they start showing up consistently instead of occasionally. But here's the part that makes this even more interesting. Despite all those limitations, he still managed to stand out. Still made plays, still delivered throws under pressure, still shown flashes that keep people talking, even when the situation around him isn't ideal. And that raises a question a lot of people aren't comfortable answering yet. What happens when he's not under constant pressure? Because if he's been building his game in difficult conditions this entire time, then improvement around him doesn't just help, it unlocks something. And once that door opens, it's hard to close again. Which means everything people think they've already seen from ShedeurSanders might only be the beginning. Here, where the conversation shifts from interesting to a little uncomfortable. Because everything you've seen so far from ShedeurSanders might not actually represent what he is. It might only show what he's been forced to be. Think about that for a second. A quarterback dealing with constant pressure, adjusting on the fly, speeding up every read, and still managing to produce. That's not a finished product. That's someone operating under restrictions. And when a player performs like that despite the situation, it usually means there's another level that hasn't been unlocked yet. And that's the part that should get people's attention. Because if the pressure eases, even slightly, everything changes. Now he's not rushing throws, he's placing them. He's not escaping immediately, he's stepping up, scanning and attacking. He's not reacting to chaos, he's controlling the pace of the game. That's when a quarterback goes from surviving to dictating. And based on what's already been seen in flashes, that version of Shedeur could look very different. The arm talent is already there. The touch on deep balls, the ability to layer throws between defenders, the calmness when things break down, it's all been visible in moments. But those moments haven't been consistent, not because they can't be, but because the conditions haven't allowed them to be. That's the key difference. Consistency isn't always about skill, it's about environment. Give a quarterback time, structure, and rhythm, and suddenly the game slows down. Decisions become cleaner, confidence builds, and once that confidence locks in, everything else starts to flow naturally. So now imagine that version of him. Same awareness, same composure, same instincts, but with time. That's where things start to feel different. Because at that point, you're not just looking at a player who can handle pressure. You're looking at someone who can exploit defenses when he isn't under it. Someone who can read the field fully, manipulate coverage, and take advantage of every opening instead of just the ones he has time to reach. And that's when the ceiling conversation changes completely. It's no longer about whether he can compete. It becomes about how far he can actually go when everything clicks. But here's the part that makes this even more serious. He's preparing like that version is already expected. The footwork, the repetition, the controlled environment, it all points to someone who isn't just training for improvement, but for expansion. Like he knows there's another level coming, and he's making sure he's ready the moment it arrives. And if that moment does come, if the protection improves, the system aligns, and the conditions finally match his ability, then what people have been calling potential won't stay theoretical for long. It turns into reality. And when that happens, the gap between what people expected and what actually shows up on the field is usually a lot bigger than anyone is ready for. Now step back and look at how fast the conversation changes once the draft cycle kicks in. Suddenly, it's no longer just about performance. It's about projections, rankings, and non-stop comparisons. New names start rising, old ones get questioned, and every week there's a different best option being pushed into the spotlight. And right in the middle of that storm is ShedeurSanders, once again being pulled into debates that shift almost daily. One week, he's near the top of the conversation. The next, someone else jumps ahead based on a workout, a rumor, or a single report. That's how this cycle works. It's built on momentum, not stability. And because of that, narratives can change faster than reality ever does. You'll hear analysts like Mel Kiper Jr. break down scenarios, compare skill sets, and suggest teams might lean in different directions. That's their role, to project, to analyze, to explore possibilities. But sometimes, those projections start sounding more definitive than they really are. And that's where things get complicated. Because when enough people repeat a narrative, it starts to feel like truth, even when it's still just opinion. A quarterback gets labeled as risky, another gets called safe, and suddenly fans are reacting to categories instead of actual performance. That's exactly what creates confusion around players like Shedeur. Instead of focusing on what he's consistently shown, his composure, his accuracy, his ability to handle pressure, the conversation shifts toward hypotheticals. What if this prospect develops faster? What if another player fits better? What if a team goes in a different direction? It becomes a game of possibilities rather than realities. But here's the thing about draft narratives: they're not always built to be right. They're built to keep evolving. Every new report, every insider comment, every mock draft update adds another layer. And while that keeps the conversation active, it also means the picture is constantly changing. Players rise and fall not just because of what they do, but because of how they're being talked about. And through all of this, Shedeur's approach hasn't changed. While the noise gets louder, he stays consistent. While names rotate in and out of the spotlight, his preparation stays the same. No chasing attention, no reacting to rankings, just focusing on development. That's a different kind of response. Because most players get pulled into the cycle. They start addressing the chatter, adjusting to perceptions, or trying to prove something in real time. But when you stay locked into your own process, you step outside of that cycle completely. And eventually, that creates a gap. A gap between perception and reality, between what's being said and what's actually happening. So while draft boards keep shifting and narratives keep evolving, there's a bigger question forming underneath it all. What happens when the conversation finally catches up to the performance? Because when that moment comes, when speculation fades and real play takes over, everything resets. And the players who stayed consistent through the noise, they're usually the ones who end up ahead when it matters most. At this point, it's easy to think this whole thing is blowing up just because of a few workout clips or some off-season buzz. But that's not the real reason. What's happening around ShedeurSanders right now is bigger than a viral moment. It's the collision of timing, perception, and momentum, all hitting at once in a way that's hard to ignore. Start with the timing. The off-season is when narratives are built. There are no games to settle debates, no real-time performances to silence opinions. So the spotlight shifts to anything that feels like progress: training clips, insider reports, small updates that get magnified into major talking points. And right in the middle of that window, Shedeur's work starts surfacing. Not all at once, but just enough. If you love real talk and fearless NFL breakdowns, hit subscribe and join Coach Speaks. A clip here, a glimpse there, a sign that something is changing behind the scenes. And because it's not overexposed, it creates curiosity. People start filling in the gaps themselves, trying to piece together what's really happening. That's how momentum starts. Then comes perception. For a while, the conversation around him has been mixed, some belief, some doubt, a lot of debate. But when people begin to notice consistent work without constant talking, that perception starts to shift. The narrative moves from questioning to watching more closely. Not fully convinced, but no longer dismissive. And that's a powerful place to be. Because now every new detail carries more weight. Every clip gets analyzed deeper. Every report sparks more discussion. The same people who might have overlooked him before are now paying attention, trying to figure out if they missed something. And that's where momentum takes over. Social media accelerates everything. One post leads to another. One conversation turns into 10. Suddenly, it's not just analysts talking, it's fans, creators, entire communities breaking things down in real time. And the more it spreads, the more it reinforces itself. It becomes a loop. Attention creates curiosity. Curiosity creates discussion. Discussion creates more attention. And right now, Shedeur is sitting at the center of that loop. But here, what makes this different from typical hype cycles? It's not built on one big moment. It's built on consistency. There's no single highlight carrying the narrative. It's the accumulation of work, the steady presence, the lack of distraction. That's what gives it weight. That's what makes people take it seriously instead of brushing it off as temporary noise. And because of that, it feels like something is building, not peaking. That's the key difference. Most viral moments spike and fade. This one is growing. Slowly, steadily, almost quietly, until you step back and realize how big it's become. Which leads to the real question nobody can fully answer yet. What happens when all of this attention finally meets real performance on the field? Because if the work matches the momentum, if the preparation shows up exactly the way people are starting to expect, then this won't just be an off-season story anymore. It turns into something much bigger. Something that doesn't just trend for a moment, but actually changes the way people see him moving forward. All of this leads to a moment that feels bigger than people are willing to admit right now. Because when you step back and look at everything surrounding ShedeurSanders, the quiet work, the shifting narratives, the growing attention, it doesn't feel like a typical off-season storyline anymore. It feels like the early stages of something that's about to catch a lot of people off guard. The league thinks it has him figured out. There are opinions already formed, strengths and weaknesses listed out, comparisons made, ceilings predicted, doubts repeated enough times to sound like fact. That's how this always goes, until reality shows up and forces everyone to adjust. And that's the part no one can fully prepare for. Because what makes this situation different is just talent. It's the combination of timing, mindset, and development all aligning at once. He's not just entering the next phase of his career. He's building toward it with intention, piece by piece, before most people even realize what's forming. And when that kind of preparation meets opportunity, things change quickly. All the debates, they don't disappear, but they lose control of the narrative. Because once real performances start stacking up, opinions stop leading the conversation. They start reacting to it. That's when the shift happens. The same questions that once sounded confident start to feel uncertain. The same doubts that filled entire segments get replaced with explanations, people trying to figure out how they missed what was right in front of them. And it always happens faster than expected. Because the truth is, players who work like this, quietly, consistently, without distraction, they don't usually arrive slowly. They show up all at once. One game turns into two, two turns into a stretch, and suddenly what looked like potential becomes production. That's the moment everything flips. But here, what makes this even more interesting? He's not chasing that moment. He's preparing for it. While the outside world debates timelines and expectations, he's focused on being ready whenever that opportunity fully opens. No rush, no panic, just steady progress toward a version of himself that hasn't been fully seen yet. And that's what should stand out the most. Because if everything we've talked about, the work, the structure, the possible alignment around him, if all of that comes together at the right time, then this won't just be a solid progression. It'll feel like an arrival. The kind that forces the league to adjust in real time. So maybe the question is whether ShedeurSanders is ready. Maybe it's whether everyone else is ready for what happens when preparation, opportunity, and belief all collide at once. Because if that moment hits the way it's building toward, the league won't just notice. It'll have to respond.
If you enjoyed today's breakdown and want to keep up with all the drama, trades, and behind-the-scenes action in the NFL, then don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps this channel grow and lets us know you love this kind of content. And hey, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with your friends, your group chats, or anyone who loves football as much as you do. The more the conversation spreads, the better it gets. Most importantly, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss when we drop fresh stories, wild rumors, or breaking updates that the mainstream media won't talk about.